know the dangers that exist out there, the draining situations, the people who weigh you down, the environments that take something from you without giving anything back. You've learned to recognize these signs. Scorpio always learns. What no one warned you about is that the most dangerous places on the last day of May aren't on the map. They are inside. And you're probably already in one of them right now, without knowing the name, without knowing the way out, with that heavy feeling that doesn't go away even when everything seems fine on the outside. Today, I'm going to show you the three. Not as theory, as recognition, the kind of thing you'll hear and feel that someone has finally named something you were carrying without being able to describe. But there's a catch. Understanding these three places changes something, not because knowledge solves everything, but because Scorpio, when it understands the mechanism of a trap, never falls into it the same way again. And what you're going to discover here isn't just about today. It's about a pattern that operates within you every time a cycle is about to close. By the end of this video, something inside you will make sense in a way it never has before. Imagine a house with its windows closed on a stormy day. From the outside, it looks safe. The rain doesn't get in, the wind doesn't knock anything over, everything is in its place, but the air starts to get heavy, slowly, almost imperceptibly, and those inside begin to feel it without understanding why. That's the image I want you to carry with you while I show you the first place. First and foremost is silence. Not just any silence, the specific silence that Scorpio cultivates when hurt, when overwhelmed, when feeling the world won't understand, even if explained. This silence begins as a choice, an intelligent choice even, because there are times when silence truly protects, but it has a tendency to grow beyond the point where it should stop. Scorpio isolates itself, that's no secret, but what most people don't talk about is the exact mechanism behind that isolation. You withdraw because you felt something you don't want to show. You close the windows because you don't want the wind to knock down what's standing. But the air starts to feel heavy, and the silence that began as protection becomes something different. It becomes a form of punishment you inflict on yourself without realizing you're doing it. He thinks of a knife that was used for self-defense. It makes sense to have it on hand when there is danger, but after the danger has passed, the knife is still there and still pointed. Only now it's pointed inward. Scorpio's isolation works like this on the last day of a cycle. What began as a survival instinct transforms into a silent prison. And the question that lingers, and will continue to linger, is, what if the greatest threat you face today didn't come from any external situation, but from the silence you yourself have built around something that needs a voice? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. And it arrived at a time when I was doing exactly what Scorpio does, using silence as a shield, convinced that this was strength. The book didn't tell me to talk more or to be more open. It showed me something different, that there is a difference between silence that preserves and silence that imprisons, and that Scorpio by nature has the ability to distinguish between the two, but needs to learn to use this ability consciously, not impulsively. What impressed me was precisely this. He doesn't treat Scorpio as a problem to be fixed. He treats it as an architecture, an internal structure that has its own logic, and when you understand that logic, you stop fighting against yourself and start using what you already are. You're here today, preparing for the last day of May, with that weight on your chest that I described at the beginning. It's still there, isn't it? That's why you need to act now, not tomorrow, not after things settle down. Because Scorpio tends to postpone precisely what matters most, waiting for the right moment that never seems right enough. This is the moment, The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware. This content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And before we continue, tell me in the comments, which of these 3 places do you feel you occupy most often? Silence, the unspoken, or the cycle that doesn't close? Write it down below. This will help you understand where your energy is being drained today. The second option is more subtle, harder to name, and perhaps it's the most dangerous of the 3 precisely for that reason. Have you ever written a letter that you never sent? Not necessarily on paper, it might have been in your head. A conversation you rehearsed internally, with a beginning, middle, and end, articulated with surgical precision that never reached its recipient. Scorpios do this frequently, and there's a very specific reason for it. It's not cowardice, it's not a lack of courage, it's something more complex. When Scorpio feels deep hurt, an internal process takes place that has 2 stages. In the first, you process. You delve into the depths of what was felt, examine every angle, understand where it came from, what it means, what it reveals about you and the other person. Scorpio does this part better than any other sign. The problem is the second stage, that of externalizing it. Because externalizing requires accepting that the other person may not understand, that the other person may react in a way that hurts even more, that the risk of speaking is real, so Scorpio keeps it inside. The conversation stays inside. And what stays inside doesn't stay still, it ferments. Over time, the original resentment gains layers that no longer have much to do with the event that originated it. It becomes a field that colors how you see that person, that situation, sometimes even yourself. There's something else happening here that I need to mention. When Scorpio holds on to a conversation, they don't just hold on to the words they didn't say, they also hold on to the expectation of how the other person should have reacted. You mentally constructed the ideal response, the response that would show the other person understands, cares, and acknowledges what was felt. And since that response never came, because the conversation never happened, you remain in a suspended state between the real hurt and the imagined resolution that never came. It's a strange place to inhabit. Part of you knows it's not fair to hold the other person responsible for a conversation they didn't know needed to happen. But the other part, the one that processed everything so deeply, that felt so intensely, that part can't simply let go, because letting go seems to ignore how much it mattered. And for Scorpio, denying the intensity of what they felt is almost a betrayal of themselves. Imagine ink spilled on a folded sheet of paper. You fold the paper before the ink dries, and when you open it, you realize it's imprinted on both sides. You wanted to record something on only one side, but the other side is also marked. The conversation that didn't happen works like that. It marks the side you wanted, the relationship with the other person, but it also marks the side you didn't see, the relationship with yourself. And what remains unresolved in May today, on the last day of this cycle, may have a lot to do with conversations that were left unresolved. Not necessarily major confrontations. Sometimes they are small things. A disappointment you didn't verbalize, a need you didn't express, a truth you felt and kept to yourself, thinking it wasn't worth it or that the other person wasn't ready. Who's carrying the weight of this conversation? You. The other person doesn't even know it's happening. And this creates an asymmetry that few name. You are carrying the weight of a conflict that for the other person simply didn't happen. The relationship seems normal to them. For you, there's an invisible layer that colors everything. And when the other person acts carelessly or doesn't notice something that seems obvious to you, the unspoken resentment deepens. Not because the other person is doing something new, but because the conversation that remained inside gives a new interpretation to everything that comes after. And there's a detail that complicates things even further. The more time passes, the harder it seems to talk, because now it's not just the original hurt, it's also the time that passed without it being expressed. It's the explanation you'll need to give about why you didn't speak up before. It's the risk that the other person will ask why you went so long without saying anything. And Scorpio, who prefers depth to clarification, who prefers silence to exposure, keeps postponing, and the conversation gets heavier, and the place becomes harder to leave if what you just heard resonated in a way that hurt a little. Pay attention to this, because that kind of resonance is exactly what the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose specifically addresses for Scorpio. Not as generic self-help, as a map of your own layers, the kind of map that shows you where the ink spilled on the side you didn't see. Scorpio has an extraordinary capacity for internal processing. The book expands on this capacity to include what comes after processing: transmutation. Transforming what's trapped into fuel, not more weight. And on the last day of a cycle, that's worth more than anything. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. The third place is the oldest of the three, and it's probably the one that's carrying the most weight today. Everyone has memories, but Scorpio doesn't have ordinary memories. You have anchors, events from the past that continue to exert force on the present, as if the time between them and now didn't exist. It's not nostalgia, it's not longing, it's something else. It's as if a part of you remained stuck in that moment, still processing, still waiting for a resolution that never came. Imagine a program open on your computer. You're not using it, but it's there, running in the background, consuming memory, slowing down the system. You don't even notice it's open anymore because you've gotten used to working with this slowness. You start to think that's just how the computer is, but it's not. It's the program that was never closed. Scorpio carries open programs, and May, specifically, has a tendency to activate the oldest ones. I don't know what yours is. It could be a relationship that ended but was never truly processed, a decision you made and still question, a version of yourself that got stuck at some point in a transformation that never came to fruition. Whatever it is, it's consuming energy that should be available for the present moment. There's a specific pattern that Scorpio repeats with these open cycles. You don't think about them all the time. It would be too tiring, and Scorpio is pragmatic enough to function even with the weight. But they appear at times of transition, when something is about to change, when one cycle is ending and another is beginning. It's as if Scorpio's psyche, realizing there's a portal ahead, first displays all the windows that are still open, almost like an involuntary inventory. An accounting you didn't ask for, but that happens anyway. And what do you do with this inventory? Most of the time, you close your eyes, or you glance quickly and look away, because each open window represents a point where the transformation wasn't complete. And looking at it honestly requires confronting the reason why it wasn't complete. And that's where the paradox comes in. And here's the paradox that needs to be said aloud. Scorpio is the sign of transformation, the sign that dies and is reborn. Everyone knows this, but what few realize is that genuine transformation requires closure, and closure requires mourning. And mourning requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is precisely what Scorpio resists most. So you break it down into parts. Part of you moves on, part stays, and that part that stays isn't weakness. It's the open program. It's the cycle that wasn't closed with the kind of presence it required. How many windows do you still have open? Scorpio doesn't close cycles for the same reason they don't send the letters, because closing requires acknowledging that it's over. And acknowledging that it's over requires feeling what you never wanted to feel about it. It's easier to leave it open, to pretend it's paused, not closed. But a paused cycle still consumes resources, and on the last day of May, you may be carrying the weight of open windows from months, sometimes years ago. And the system is slow, not because you are weak or because your life is wrong, but because you have processes running in the background that never received the closure they deserved. Imagine a cocoon. The creature is inside, ready for transformation, but you can imagine it resisting leaving, not because it's not ready, but because the outside world is unknown. Inside, even if it no longer fits, it's familiar. It's the map it knows. Scorpio does this with cycles it needs to close. It stays inside the cocoon, not because the transformation hasn't happened, but because leaving requires admitting that what's left behind is left behind. For good. No guarantee of what comes next. And what would happen if you stopped protecting what's already over? If you consciously close the windows that are open in the background, not violently, not hastily, but with the kind of presence each one deserves. This is no easy exercise. In fact, it is perhaps the most difficult thing a Scorpio can do, but it is the thing that releases the most energy, more than any external change, more than any forced new beginning. Because no real beginning happens until the previous one has truly ended. There's something in the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose that goes straight to that blind spot, not as a technique, but as recognition. The book understands that Scorpio doesn't need instructions to transform. You already know how to transform. What you need is permission to end it, and a framework that shows you how to do it without losing what's essential in the process. Closing windows isn't about erasing memories. It's about freeing up system memory so that the present can run at real speed. So that the portal that opens tomorrow, the first day of June, the first day of a new cycle, finds you with available resources, not drained by processes that should have already finished. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Now that the 3 places have been named, I want to show you something that changes the perspective of everything that has been said so far. You spent the entire month of May, in one way or another, in contact with these 3 places. The silence that turned against you, the conversation that remained inside, the cycle that wasn't closed, and you're still standing. You're still here on this last day, able to hear all of this without breaking, able to recognize the patterns without running away from them. This is no small thing. It is, in fact, the clearest evidence of what Scorpio truly is. Not a sign that avoids the dark, a sign that can inhabit the dark without losing consciousness. The difference between the two is enormous, and it is precisely this difference that defines what makes you unique, irreplaceable, and absolutely yours. The portal that the last day of May represents is not a threat. Portals are never threats to those who were made to cross them. And you were. Not for the reason most people think, not because Scorpio is invincible, but because you have developed, throughout a lifetime of cycles, deaths, and rebirths, a capacity that no other sign possesses to the same extent, the ability to continue even when you don't know what comes next. The last page of a book can be carefully closed or left open on the floor. Both ways end the book, but only one of them leaves you ready to pick up the next one. Today is that moment. The last day of May is not the end of anything. It's the conscious closing of a cycle that, when closed with presence, with honesty, with the kind of quiet courage that only Scorpio truly knows, releases exactly what you will need for what comes next. The 3 places I showed you today are not weaknesses. They are the map. And whoever has the map doesn't get lost. They choose the path. Scorpio carries what no other sign can bear: the depth, the intensity, the ability to go to the bottom without asking permission. And what you carried in May, the silence, the unspoken, the open cycles, was not in vain. It was the exact weight that forges the kind of strength that doesn't appear on the surface, that doesn't show itself in calm times, but that is absolutely available when the moment demands more than the normal can give. Iron that has been through fire is no longer the same. It's stronger. You know this better than anyone, not as a metaphor, but from lived experience. May the last day of May find you whole, not because everything has been resolved, but because you have what you need to get through what's to come. You always have.